Hello everyone, welcome to my channel, The Crafted Studio Company. I am here today with another decorated cookie tutorial with my company Sugar Bee Cookies here in Western Canada. And today I'm really excited. We're going to be working on this super sweet Love is in the Air hot air balloon theme for Valentine's Day. This collection focuses on outlining and flooding, some wet on wet details, as well as some accent piping details. This is part of a kit collection that you can purchase locally from me, where I pre-do all the icing and the cookies for you, as well as give you any tools you need for the kits. If you don't have that kit, don't worry. You can follow along after baking your own cookies and making your own icing. So let's just jump into it. If you did purchase the kit, you're going to get a total of 8 naked cookies. I'm only going to show 4 here because I've already got 4 decorated for the samples. You're going to get 2 hot air balloons, 2 large hearts, you're going to get 2 smaller hearts, and then you're going to get 2 of this cloud hybrid shape that I have. Now, what I was going for is I want to create a cloud, but then I wanted room to do these sort of heart mobile raindrops. So I cut out my cloud cookie in the dough, and then I cut out a little excess sort of bump out of a rectangular shape here, and then I baked them together. And you can see the line there, but they baked together. You can also just get the actual cookie shape made by a 3D printer, or Etsy and Amazon has this shape for this. Quite often you'll find them in baby shower sets. So that's what we're working with for cookies. You'll also get 3 colors of icing in a dark pink, a white, and a blushy pink. And you'll also get a needle scribe tool. Yours may look a little different or be a different color, but this is sort of a cookie decorator's best friend. It helps us move icing around, it helps us pop air bubbles, and pick up any mistakes that you might not want on your cookie. So I highly recommend investing in one of these. You can get them anywhere. You can also go to a knitting section of a home store and get a metal, really thin knitting needle tool. Or you can just use a bamboo skewer or toothpick. So that's everything that the kit provides. And we're going to kind of just talk a little bit about the icing. So when you get your icing, you'll want to make sure that you massage your bags. You might see some discoloration in the icing, and that's just because I quite often will pre-do the icing a day or 2 in advance. And then as the color sits, the pigments kind of pull away with the moisture in the water and the sugar. So just massage your bags. You can see I'm pinching the end here because I already have my bag cut. But I will show you about how to cut bags. So give all your icing bags a massage. Do it before you cut the bag open, and it's much easier. And I will just quickly show you how to cut open a bag, because these ones are already pre-done. Okay, I'm going to show you with a different color. I was mixing for a different kit for a workshop I'm doing tomorrow, but this one's not open yet. And when you get this, what you want to do is you want to kind of pinch out the end and kind of pull back the icing as best you can away from the tip. And you can see, pinch the tip between your fingers, and you want just a tiny little nip of an end there. And then you're going to cut that off, but you want to cut even less than you're pinching off. Always start smaller and go bigger as you need to. And then what you're looking for, just going to grab a piece of parchment here. What you're looking for is your icing, when you just squeeze it gently, to come out nice and consistently. You don't want to be squeezing too hard. If you have to squeeze too hard, or you find your icing is sort of curling up on the ends and not flowing, you want to go back in and cut just a tiny little more off. It is very easy to cut too much off, and because this is going to be a more fluid icing, it will ooze out and it'll be harder to control when the tip is bigger. So start smaller and go bigger as needed. Always keep a cloth or a wet paper towel on hand so that you can wipe your tips and wipe any surface messes as you go. Now, I'm going to just use this one to show you some basic piping skills and how to get comfortable with the piping bag. You want to hold the thickest part of the piping bag in the palm of your hand. I'm covered in icing everywhere. I'm also covered in blue food coloring. Okay, so hold the piping bag in the palm of your hand, and this is so that we can squeeze when we need to for more pressure with our whole hand, or you can just squeeze with your fingertips gently when we want a lighter pressure. You'll also want to make sure that you're always controlling and stabilizing your hand with your other hand, either your wrist or the bag itself or both. Get comfortable with that right in the get-go. It feels awkward, but eventually you'll realize that gives you the most stability. So if you can learn that now, the better. If you just try and do this one-handed, you're going to get uneven lines, and it's going to take you a little bit longer to do things. So to pipe a line, what you're going to do is you're going to be squeezing gently with your whole hand, but not hard. And you're going to let that icing kind of touch the surface. And this is going to sound counterintuitive, but you're going to lift away, do your line drop, and release your pressure. Lifting gives you the most accurate line work. When you try and do it close to the surface, like you're drawing with a pencil, it's going to be uneven, inconsistent, and you're not going to have as much control. Lifting gives you the most control. So let the icing fall into place. You almost draw with your wrist. Now, if you want to do sort of curvy lines, it's the same thing. See how high I'm holding this away from the paper? I'm squeezing just very consistently and easily. If I tried to do that, drawing right on near the surface, I don't have time to fix the icing or let it fall into place, and it's coming out thick and glommy and really inconsistent. So always just lift and let it fall. Let the icing do the work. So with a piece of parchment or wax paper or on a tray of some sort that you can wipe off, get a little comfortable with that. Practice some lines, practice some squiggles, and just kind of get comfortable with how the icing comes out and the pressure that's needed. Also maybe practice a couple of dots and different size dots. So to do a dot, all I'm doing is I'm holding the tip closer to the paper this time, and I'm squeezing, and I'm not moving the tip until I release my pressure and then pull away. That way the icing blooms up over the tip into this nice little ball. And you can use your needle tool to tap out any little peaks or anything that may stay around. To do a bigger one, you just keep squeezing and let it bloom out, release your pressure, pull away. This will come in handy because we need to learn how to do those and then create teardrops out of them where you can kind of pull down. So all I'm doing is squeezing like that ball and then still squeezing and pulling down and dragging my piping bag through the icing. And that's a teardrop. So those are going to come in handy to do these hearts. So to do a heart, we're going to do those teardrops pulled to the side and then on the other side. And you can see I'm skipping quite far away and doing it the opposite way and coming down and marrying the two. The reason why I skipped further away than you would want to do is because if you go too close like this, if you go too close, you're going to lose all the definition in your heart because the icing's going to flow and flood. Now, if that does happen, as you get decorating, all you need to do is take your needle tool drag it down through the icing through the surface, and it fixes your heart. And then that line will blend itself. So that's just some basics to get us going. Now, we're going to just jump in and get decorating, and the first one we're going to work on is this cloud. So I'm just going to pop these aside, and we'll talk about why we're doing the cloud first and the order that we're going to do things in. So we want to be able to outline and flood the cloud part and then let it crust over for a good 5 to 15 minutes before we come back in and do any of these other details. Sort of the piping on top or these, because we want the icing to kind of have a little bit of a crust on the top so that these layers don't sink into the actual wet icing. There are going to be other cookies that we do, such as these ones, where we actually want some of the details to sink into the icing, and that's called a wet on wet technique, and we'll be doing those in a moment. So we're going to start with the cloud, and then we're going to work to the large heart, then the small heart, and then the balloon, and then we're going to come back around and finish details on some of these. Cookie decorating takes time, and you need time in between each layer. So with your white, let's just make sure that's still in frame. Good, you can still see that. With your white, what you're going to want to do before we get with the white, take your needle tool, and some of your cookies may already have a natural line in it for you to follow because of how I baked it. It depends if I get my 3D printer to make me this cutter or not, with where I don't have to bake them together. But just kind of create a little bit of a line or a scallop mark on your cookie without creating too many crumbs. And you won't be able to see that on camera, but I can see it. And that just gives you a little starting point. And all we're going to do is follow that line. And that's that lifting and drawing away. And I can see my icing is a little translucent, so I gotta just mix it up in my bag here. And then we're going to go in and we're going to outline the rest of the cloud. We just wanted to create the bottom of the cloud there. So just go slow. And you can see every little bump in the cloud I'm creating my own little curved line with. I'm lifting and letting it drop in place, and I'm almost touching back down in between each bump. This is going to give me the most control and most clean outline. And you can see I actually came away from the cookie because as we flood it, that might push out a bit, and we don't want to overflow the cookie. So to flood a cookie, you can turn your cookie as you need to. You're going to squeeze with more pressure, and we're going to be squeezing around and around your shape and then working our way inward. So to flood a cookie, you can see how much more is coming out now because I'm squeezing really hard with my whole palm. And you see how I'm guiding myself? And we're going to work around as best you can. You're going to miss some spots, and that doesn't matter. You're going to work around your outline. Stop as you need to. Give your wrist a break as you need to. If you find your icing is kind of trying to flow over at one point, just pull it back with the tip, or go in with your needle tool and pull it back. So you can see how thick that came out. That's because I'm squeezing nice and hard. And then we're just going to keep doing this. And you can see I'm leaving gaps. Some of you may not have that. Some of you may have more. If you have more than this, you want to go in and put in more icing. But this icing should flow and flood itself quite easily. And if you have gaps, just use your needle tool to kind of swirl the icing into place and connect it with each other. And anywhere you have your edges that need to be corrected out, all I do is almost these little whipping motions, pushing and pulling the icing. You can see I can almost control the line a bit more and put it where I want. And that's just because I'm picking up the icing and I'm pulling it and pushing it into place with this little sort of whipping motion. You can tap your cookie a little bit or give it a little shimmy to kind of help level it out. And that's how we outline and flood a cookie. You can kind of go in anywhere that you see air bubbles and pop them. And this icing is what I call a flood consistency. It's a little bit of a medium flood consistency. So it's really nice because it just levels itself. And before we go into any other details, we're going to let this rest and crust. But I will say, if you're really having to work your icing to make it all level, if you're really having to work out any spots that are bare or lines or marks you have in it, you need to go back in and add more icing. You shouldn't have to spend a lot of time working it. It should do the work for you and flood itself. You just want to help manipulate it a little bit. So we're going to let that sit aside. And then we're going to work on our next cookie, which is going to be our large heart. So with this one, we want to take, you want to have your white handy, clean off the tip as you need to, and then take your light pink. And we need the white handy because we're going to be doing this wet on wet look with the polka dots. The hearts sort of banner is going to come afterwards. I'm just going to get my favorite needle tool, a little bit different than what's in the kits. Get organized. So I've got my white handy. And you're going to want to take your blush color and we're going to outline the whole thing and fill it. So we're going to start somewhere where you're comfortable. I usually start in the middle at the top and I'm going to outline my whole heart and I'm going to stop where I need to, sort of at that point. Always give yourself a break. You don't have to keep going. If you're feeling uncomfortable or your confidence is all of a sudden waning, you can always pick up where you were. You can see I'm lifting away from the cookie up top. And it's okay if you come down into your cookie. It's better to come into your cookie than off because we're going to be flooding that anyways. And then we're going to come in and we're going to flood this whole thing. So we're going to squeeze nice and hard. Now this is a big cookie. So this is going to take some time. So take a break as you need to and kind of let it just mellow in. That being said, you don't want to let it sit too long because we don't want this to start crusting over too fast, because we want to come back in with our white and do some polka dot details while this icing is nice and wet. Don't squeeze so hard that you balloon out your bag. Just squeeze and go slow. You want a nice amount to come out, but slow down. Quite often when you're trying to go too fast, you're squeezing harder and you can burst your bag, even if you've purchased a bag that says it's anti-burst. Give your cookie a little shimmy as needed and go in and correct any of those spots that are not connecting. So you can see, again, I'm just doing that little swirly motion. And connecting any spots that I didn't like or that needed. Now, if it's lumpy and bumpy and not settling down, you just want to give your cookie a little shake or shimmy. Now, when you have a full cookie like this, it's hard to grab it without mucking it up. So what I would recommend is put your needle tool into the cookie, grab the cookie itself without pressing down into it because you don't want to create any holes or crumbs. And just use that to give your cookie a little shimmy, shimmy, shimmy. And that's going to help level out. If you have any little funny areas of peaks, just tap them down. That's all it takes. If you swirl too much, sometimes you leave peaks. So you can just tap and it's almost like stitching it. So while that cookie's wet, we're going to go in with our white and we're going to create these tiny little polka dots. You don't want to squeeze much. What we're going to be doing is squeezing we're going to be just barely squeezing and touch. Oh, I don't even know if you can see that color. White on white. Okay, we're going to be squeezing with our white on this cookie. A little tiny tap and then release. They seem like tiny little polka dots, but they're going to spread in this wet icing. You can go bigger if you want. It's going to be your own personal choice. I'm going to start in the middle, up near the top. I'm going to squeeze, release. I'm going to come down about 1 inch and some, squeeze and release. I'm just going to create a whole line down, leaving those breaks and pauses in between. Now this cookie is going to be an angled heart, so I'm just picking a pattern of up and down to me. And then at the same distance away from here to here, I'm kind of going here. It's all an eyeball thing. I'm going to go in between all those dots. And if I can squeeze one more at the top, there. And then again, in between. And you just work your way. This is how you get the most consistent polka dot pattern. But if you just want to just randomly dot anywhere, you can do that too. But I'm putting just a tiny little squeeze and dot, and you can see how they're spreading out once they're in there. And that's because the wet icing is connecting with it and helping it flow together. And there you go, you have polka dots. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to put that one aside before we do any details on top because we want that to crust over. The next cookie we're going to be working on is our smaller heart. And this one, you're going to need your darker pink and that blush pink that you need that we just used. So have your blush pink at the ready. And then with your darker, we're going to flood this and then we're going to come in and do this pattern here. So we're going to start where you're comfortable, letting the icing fall into place. Touch down as you need to. And work around the heart. I actually always find hearts a little bit of a funny muscle memory to do for some reason. Okay, so some of these I'm actually further away from the edge than other areas, and that's okay because as I flood it, those areas are gonna push themselves out, like right here. So I'm just going slow. I'm actually going a little faster than you should go, and that's for the sake of the video and timing. If you want real speed, you want to be doing this about this speed that I'm doing now. And that's so that you don't squeeze too hard. Like I said with the last cookie, the faster you go, the harder you tend to squeeze. And you don't want to burst your bag. or have any air bubbles that kind of pop and blow out and cause you to make an icing mess. So just go slow and fill it. And then go in and use your needle tool. This icing is a little thicker than my other ones. I think it's because it's getting cold in here. We're currently at minus 24 degrees Celsius today. It's really cold. It's absolutely freezing. We went from 0 degrees yesterday to this. Okay, and maybe just grab your cookie, give it that little, see, it's easy to muck up. Give your cookie a little shimmy shake, flatten it out, and then while it's still wet, before it starts crusting over, take your blush pink. And if you find your piping bag is getting a little less full or loose to how it's tied, just go in and kind of twist it. And to do this pattern, and the reason why we're doing this pattern is because that's what I've used to create this basket kind of weave in the hot air balloon. But I'll show you this, and then I'll show you a really cool trick that we can do to change it up once it's on. So we're going to create lines. I'm going to start at the top so that I can stop and pick up a line across the top where that break is. And we're just doing lines right across. I'm going to fix that one a bit there. I'm leaving some space in between each one. You can go a tighter pattern if you want to. Now your cookie is always going to start crusting faster where there's less icing, like down at the tips here or along the edges. So work fast. Once that's on there, I'm going to come in the middle and I'm going to drag my needle tool straight in the icing and straight down. I'm pulling all those together. And then I'm going to do that over on the edge. I'm going to do that over here. You can see it creates this cool pattern. Tap or shake it out if you want. Those areas should heal up and level themselves. If not, you can go in and tap them. Feel like I missed a line at the top, so I'm just going to kind of go in and show you how to fix that if you've done it too. Wherever I had that line, I'm just going to pull down in that same pattern, just lightly, to make it look seamless. So we have that pattern. But you can also go in between each one and go the opposite direction. And it creates this sort of beautiful, and wipe your tip in between. And you just tap down any areas that are peeking up. And this is a really wonderful wet on wet technique that you can use in so many applications. It's great at Christmas time for Christmas ornaments, or anytime you just want a little extra pattern. And I'm just kind of stitching any areas that, because this icing is a little thick, I'm just kind of tapping and stitching it down so that I want that flat surface. So you can see two different looks, but we piped the same amount of icing. This one we have just sort of a little scalloped look, and this one they almost always remind me of little fins. And that cookie's done. That's the beauty of it. So some cookies in a collection are always going to be a little more simple, but when we put the whole collection together, they should read all together. So that is going to kind of mimic what we did in the basket on the next cookie, which is our feature cookie, which is the hot air balloon for Love is in the Air. So this one we want to think out. We're only going to be able to do some of this and let it crust over, and we're going to go back to our cloud cookie and finish up the details on that after. And then we're going to come back to this one and the bigger heart. So I would suggest taking your needle tool. What we want to do is kind of create a little bit of a section in our eye. So I'm just going to drag through the cookie a couple of little guide marks. You don't want to press down into the cookie. You don't want to break it. And you don't want any crumbs. You just want sort of a visual for your eye. And if you can brush it off so you don't have any crumbs. I know you can't really see that on the camera itself, but I can see it, and you'll see it too on your own cookie when you do it. We're going to start with our outside sections first. So we're going to come in and we're going to do these blushy pink colors, and we're going to outline and flood those sections individually. And then we're going to come down and work on the basket, which is separated away from that. We're going to leave the white for last because we don't want that white to blend into the sections that we're doing, so that we have sort of this definitive look. So I'm going to come in, pipe my blush on that little guideline that I gave myself. I'll do the other one too. And then I'm going to come around, work slowly. And if your cookie has these sort of defined hot air balloon bumps at the top, don't worry about that. We're just focusing on a nice, simple version of this. So just come down as if it's fully rounded. What we do on the top with the icing is what and how the eye is going to read. Now I can see I came a little bit up on my line there because this one I'm going to want to come right across. So you can go back in and fix any areas. See? Easy. So we're going to come in and we're going to flood one section. And again, I'm working a little bit faster than I want you guys to go. Move a little slower. And just get that filled. Pause the video as you need to. Icing on my surface that's catching on the cookie. Okay. I'm gonna give my cookie a little shimmy. Fix any areas that need fixing. You can kind of pull the icing up into little corners. Instead of adding more, you can use what you already have there. And right off the bat, I'm going to go in with my white and do polka dots. So I'm going to kind of, instead of working up and straight up and down, I'm going to work with the curve of the balloon. And it's just like we did that other heart. Tiny little dots in the middle. And then I'm going to go to the sides. You can work from side to side if that's easier for your eye. I'm trying not to cover my bag so much so that you guys can see what I'm doing, but you really do want to guide your bag if you can. Oh, some polka dots. And then go in and flood the other section. Give your hand a break if you need to. This can be very hard on the wrists. Turn your cookie as you need to get a better look too. Okay, and then I'm going to go in with my polka dots. And again, I'm starting at the top in the middle and I'm working the curve of the balloon. It's just that little added detail as if we've added a texture. Perfect. Oops, I spun it right around. Okay, so we're going to let that crust over before we do the white because we want to keep these lines in these sections very definitive. You can almost see that they go down onto their own and create their own line. So we really want to keep that defined. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down to the bottom here. We're going to create the basket. And all I'm going to do is go right across Nice simple line. And I'm kind of leaving a little bit of a space if I can. And then you can kind of finish this little rectangular shape. So I'm just doing them all as individual lines, and I'm stopping and releasing the pressure and restarting again. And then we're going to go in and flood that out. Fix it up with your needle tool. I'm just kind of reshaping the bottom here because I didn't like how I piped the outline. Just go slow. Your icing will move with those little whipping motions, like you're pulling it to where you want it to go and then pushing it down. Okay, now with your blush or white, it really doesn't matter, but I've used the blush. I'm going to create a tighter version of that basket weave that we did, or the scallop in this one. So I'm going to create, I'm barely squeezing. I'm almost just only using my pinky. And I'm squeezing nice, simple, clean lines, and I'm just barely squeezing. But I'm going to do this a little tighter. I'm going to do my lines closer together. And if your line breaks, don't worry, just pick it up, go to where you need to, because you're going to be drawing with the needle tool through it all anyways. Wipe off your tip in between as you need to. You want nice, clean lines as best as possible, so you're using just a little bit of pressure. My shape, I'm a little bit askew, but that's okay. And I'm always going to start in the middle. Whenever I have a pattern, I always start in the middle because then I can see my spacing. I'm going to draw through the icing and pull down. I'm going to skip ahead to between there and the edge and pull down. And then I'm going to do the same over here. And if you're getting these little pull down peaks, just go in, kind of push the icing back into place. And you can go in and make additional marks if you want to. To do these additional ones, I'm actually just barely dragging through the blush itself instead of through the whole icing. I'm just pulling it down just a little bit. And go in and fix any little areas. And if you want to, right on the edge, you can kind of pull down so that those last little lines follow the pattern a bit better. And if you have any little areas that kind of muddied or mucked up, you can kind of go in with just a little bit of your dark pink where the pink should be. I just piped tiny little dots. So I didn't go over top of any of that blush. Hopefully my big old noggin isn't getting in the way here. I'm leaning into the cookie to see it. But you can kind of go in because it's wet on wet and rework it a bit. And this is where we're going to leave this one for a little bit. Actually, just going to check. You guys probably have, yeah, we can go ahead and work on the white. So allowing that time, the blush, the time to rest while we worked on this bit, we can now go in with the white. Now we're going to have to do this a little carefully, but what we want to do is just touch towards where the blush is and connect it with the white, and then touch and release to there. We're going to do that at the bottom as well. Now, you can go in and just flood this as is, or if you're feeling particularly confident, we can actually create a barrier line right beside our blush section. Go slow. Try not to go right on top of the pink. Just go beside it. This just helps us get an extra barrier between the white and the pink. It's not necessary. I can actually see I went up onto the pink a little bit here, so those are going to bleed together a little bit, but that's okay because that's exactly where my flag is going to go later. And then we're going to go in and we're going to flood this out. Now I'm working around the outside and I'm trying not to push too much onto the pink, but I'm pushing it just enough that it connects to the edge of it. I'm going to give myself a break. You can kind of see you have this gap here, but when we start putting in more icing and manipulating it with the needle tool, it's going to press up against it more. I'm also trying to do this at a funny angle that I would normally work at because I don't want to get in the way of the camera. Just slowly go in and fill it all up. Make sure your needle tool is clean because if it has any other icing on it, it will pick it up in this new color. And just be very, very careful as you're moving your cookie around. Quite often I will just use my needle tool to twist it and move it around so that I don't muck up any edges that are already done. Now, that little gap, I'm going to just slowly do that little whipping motion. I'm pulling and pushing the icing where I need it to go. If this is not working easily, then you need to go in and add more icing. Also keep in mind that your icing is going to keep moving after you stop working with it. Shimmy, shimmy, shimmy. Now one thing you want to be very careful of, other than mucking up the edges, is that when you're shaking your cookie after you've already done some sections, the icing is very fluid underneath and it's crusting on top. So as you shake it, it can crack the top. So just be careful, don't shake too much when you've already got existing areas. So we're going to go in with our blush and we're going to create those little polka dots. I need my glasses. Okay. Tiny little dots. And I'm actually touching the tip of the icing right down into the white. So make sure you clean in between. And because we have a curve here, sometimes you'll have a couple of little areas that you can add in an extra dot in the center where it's the widest. And boom. Perfect. So we're going to come back to our cloud cookie and our big heart cookie while this one crusts over, because we want this to rest before we add on those final details. But otherwise, we got the base of it done. Okay, because the cloud cookie was the very first one we did, and it's going to be the most rested and crusted, bring it back over, but be careful because you don't want to crack that crust. And I can see I got some sort of little fluff piece on here, little piece of, okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some swirls and just fun little patterns. We got a little bit of icing on that one right there. So I'm just going to grab a piece of parchment, that one we were working on earlier. And I just want to kind of show you guys, I'm going to show you in the blue again because it shows up the most instead of my white, but we'll be working with white on the cloud. In order to to outline with the little swirlies, all I'm doing is I'm actually following around a curve and then I'm just looping. So I'm going to create a couple areas that have loops and swirls going opposite ways. You can kind of do little, whatever you want. There's no right or wrong, but it's that loop. So I'm just, oh, clean my tip. I'm going to just, not connecting. You want to make sure you connect to your surface. Okay, there you go. You just want to let the icing fall in place, and I'm still lightly squeezing, and then I'm just kind of letting my wrist do the work, looping it. So we're going to be doing some cloud loopies with the white on the white. You could actually just outline it if you want, but I'm going to start here, and I'm going to create one little outline, maybe one loop, and I'm going to come around and down and a little bit of a swirl. There's no right or wrong. Do whatever you want. You're basically just creating little areas with swirls and loops just to kind of get that feeling of a cloud. And when you get to the bottom, maybe just create a couple of little exaggerated bumps. And there you go. Nice and easy. Now, we're also going to come in and create a couple of right along the bottom. I'm going to just create a couple little lines. I'm connecting just before my cloud. I don't want to go up onto my cloud because then it's going to look clunky. I'm just creating a couple of little lines at different heights. I'm kind of staggering them. Some are short, some are long. Clean your tip as you need to, or if you have a little bit of a mistake. And if you didn't quite connect to your cloud, that's when you take your needle tool and just draw it up and touch it. All right, now we're going to create some hearts. So we're going to use our pink and our blush. And we're going to come in, and you can do them in any pattern. You can do them all in one color, whatever you want. I'm going to just start on one, and beside, at the base of one of those lines, I'm actually even going right on top of the white line. I'm going to create a couple of little hearts. I'm going to bring my needle tool down through it to exaggerate that heart shape. Now this is another way you can do a heart, is you can do 2 dots and then just barely squeeze a little bit, and then instead of squeezing out the rest, I'm just using the tip of the icing bag to pull it down. So that's another way you can do a heart. Fill in any little sections. You're going to find your own ways of doing it. Now this guy is going to barely fit on, so I'm just going to give the illusion and let him hang off the edge. And I'm okay with that. But then I'm going to pull my needle tool to make sure he doesn't drip off the edge. Okay. And then I'm going to use my lighter color, and I'm going to go down on the lower ones. So I don't really want them all in a straight line. I kind of want them at different heights. It's not a lot of room to work with. It depends where you came across at the bottom of your cloud, but just go slow. And look at any other ones that you didn't like as before they crust over. your cloud is done. Amazing. So we'll just put them aside carefully. If you're worrying about mucking up your edges, just push them aside with your needle tool. Okay. Then we're going to come in with our heart, our bigger heart. And we want to create kind of like these little banners to kind of mimic the banners on the hot air balloon that we did. Almost like flags, but we're going to put hearts on them instead. So we're going to take our white, and this should be crusted over enough now that we can work on top without it melting down into it. If your cookie looks like it's particularly loose or still jiggling, then I would just let it rest about 5 more minutes. But for the sake of video, I'm gonna start here. So you can see I'm starting down not quite a third of the way down the whole length of this cookie. And I'm gonna just pipe a line. I'm gonna start and connect, and I'm gonna come up to this corner in the middle here of the round. Squeezing a line. Don't worry about your dots underneath. And then I'm just going to create another one that swoops down to about there. And with my dark pink, I'm going to go in and I'm going to start on this one first so that I know where my spacing is, because we're dealing with up and down, and this one kind of connects both of them. I'm just going to create a heart. And then I'm going to leave some space in between and do a couple more. You can do as many as you want, but less is more sometimes. And then I'm kind of working in between from where I have hearts up top, just so that it's not too muddied for the eye. And I'm going right over top of that line as if they're hanging on it. Super sweet and simple. I have 5 on here, which is great. When you're dealing with design, you kind of always want them in uneven numbers if possible when you're doing clusters like this, because they're all clustered in the center. So I'm also going to take this pink and just create a couple of little dots in the middle. This is just going to kind of tie the whole thing together and bring that color in so that the whole collection reads with all the colors. And one of the other things I did on this one, and it's not that noticeable, but it is a detail that makes this feel like a more cohesive flag line, is I'm going to come in with little white dots surround on either side of those ones. If you don't have room for this, don't worry. It's just a way of me getting a little bit of extra texture so it doesn't look like just a white line underneath. And there you go. Your big heart is done. And of course, your little heart was already complete with the first go round, but you can go in and you can add any little details if you want. Like if you want to put a little heart on yours, go ahead, anywhere you want. But less is more. Okay. So I'm going to carefully bring back this guy. Okay. And we're going to do the flags on this guy too, on the hot air balloon. And it's going to be very similar to what we just did on the big heart. We're going to take our white. Actually, before we do the flags, because this is crusted over, it's less icing than the white that we did in the center. I want to give that just a little extra time. So I'm going to do some details down here. So anywhere you have the edges up right here or the edge of the sections, I'm just going to connect a little line to the basket, because your balloon part has to be connected to your basket. And you can leave it just like that, or you could add just a little detail if you want. You could do a line across the top of your basket and then little dots on it, kind of like what we just did on the flags. Just separate your little dots. so that they don't bleed together. Just gives it a little finished look. This technique here, these aren't little dots. These are actually a different piping technique that I did. Gives a similar look, but those ones are a little more smoother in a chain. These ones are gonna probably stay more defined for you. And if you have any bleeding together, you can kind of just let them crust over for a minute, pick it up, and go back in and fix it. Okay, so that should have given us just that little bit more time before we do the flags here. So I'm going to come halfway down my balloon, and then I'm going to go up to, if this were in a section of sort of quarters, like here, 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 and here, I'm going to come up to the first quarter, and then I'm going to come down to over here. And you can go any direction you want. You can go straight across if you want, but I would suggest curving it if you do, because you want to work with the shape of the balloon being 3D. You kind of want to give the illusion of the eye of some movement here. So I'm just going to pipe. I'm not going to overthink it. I'm just going to do it. And see, if you break your line, instead of letting it drop on the icing, just put your hand or a towel in the way and go back in, and I'm just going to go over top of that very carefully. And that's okay, because we're going to be doing some details on there. All right, so I'm going to start at this connection point with one heart. And I didn't quite like the placement of my hearts on this one. I got 4 on the top and 3 on the bottom. I don't know how many I'm going to fit here, but I'm going to actually start with the bottom this time. When I did this one, I had originally just done the top line and just decided it needed something extra. So I'm going to actually just start on the bottom. It's going to give me a better idea of placement because this one's a longer line. There. And now I'm going to work in between up top. He came out really thin and skinny, so I'm just going to add just a little bit more in there. So he looks a little more like the others. Okay. I think I like that better. I have a little bit of room on the edge here, but I'm going to leave it for now. Quite often, the best tip I can suggest is that if you don't like how something's coming out, leave it, finish the other details, and then come back and see where you're at. So we're going to do those little details with the dots in between, because that might be all I need to pull it together. And then I'm going to use my white. Yeah, see, I don't end up having room for another heart on the end there. And if you need to go just underneath the line, that's fine. You don't have to go on top of it. And there you guys go. You have a magical hot air balloon. So there is our Love is in the Air collection for Valentine's Day. It's so cute, it's so fun and whimsical, and you could do a collection like this for a baby shower, and instead of hearts, you could do just little triangles for flags or little raindrops or whatever you want. So that is our collection today. Well done. I hope you all have a wonderful week. And give yourself a hand. You just decorated a beautiful collection of cookies. Have a beautiful day.